Dalaya, we did know each other for some time now, and I'm very glad that we're working, collaborating towards to this new podcast. And before we dive into our today's first episode on EWNET Podcast, I would like to invite you to tell us more about your earlier intuitions on research, generally back in the days when you were elementary or secondary school, and you can, if there is any continuity or change into you becoming the researcher and policy advisor that you are today. And let's trace Dalaya back and to present, and also tell us about your contemporary research interests, policy intervention areas linked to that journey.
Thank you, Dr. Netsanet. I don't think there's something peculiar about my journey, but I think I would like to say that my curiosity or research intuition is something that has progressed through a lot of reading and engagement, and of course exposure to various literature in social science. But I think I've always been curious to ask questions, and I think my skill of asking questions has changed and has progressed a lot, which is quite helpful when you're doing research. I think that stands at the core of doing research work. So, of course, my background as political science has given me a strong foundation. Has given me the major frameworks that have been used to springboard to do other research work. And then my specialization in peace, security, and development, and of course has enhanced my understanding of various variables and their relationships. So I find it exciting to be in research. I find it equally exciting to translate research work into policy and action, and of course to see that impact is also equally exciting. I think for the past decade, I've worked on various topics, both independently, and of course they're quite related. So I've worked on peace building, national dialogue, and peace and security. Then my focus has now more moved to political economy, using political economy framework to understand the relationship between, of course, politics and economy, looking at the political drivers of economic development, state building. So that has been my focus, of course, looking at Ethiopia. I've also done work on business and politics, political settlements, and lately I've focused on urban politics, looking at power and economic relationships in urban areas, particularly in Addis Ababa. So I think I've added multiple layers to my research interest, and that has progressed. So I've done so much learning, but I've done so much unlearning as well. I think that's also at the core of research work, that there's so much you learn, but then there are so many of your stands, your theoretical understanding that you revisit every time you have a conversation or you're exposed to a new thinking and a new material. And I find that quite interesting. So I thrive in an environment where we have conversations with others, discussions, their work, and that's why I'm also excited to be part of EWNET as the deputy principal, where I'll be working with different women.
With me.
It's true, where I'll be working with you as well. There's so much peer learning and peer mentorship there as well, which is already happening, I think. And of course, looking forward to working with other women. I think it's not what we will do for our members, but there will be so much peer-to-peer engagement. There will be so much that they will do for us as well. I'm also excited about sharing my work and the work that I have done, my thinking behind it. So looking forward to an intellectual engagement where we talk about both the opportunities that are before us and the challenges that we face.
Yeah. So just to also go back to, naturally to bounce back to what intrigued me is your work on business and politics. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because that's the area that I don't know much, and I think all of us would benefit from your research, but also your observation on that area, and to also kind of invite us to think around that angle as well.
Sure. It's a couple of years ago I had an opportunity to work with an organization on looking at the role of business in politics, which is, I mean, it's not really a very peculiar topic for Ethiopia, but also even, I mean, all over the world. We know that businesses play a very important role in politics. So we have so many rich empirical evidence is that there's so much resources, both from the state to the private sector, but also from the private sector to the state as well. But looking at how that relationship shapes power relationship between the two groups has been quite interesting. But also on a theoretical level, I think the challenge, particularly in Ethiopia, is to see just the business sector, as sidelined, or looking at them, as a silent actor. But once you collect the empirical data and look into the different case studies, you see that businesses are quite important in shaping major policies, including shaping peace and security, especially in Ethiopia. I mean, I would love to talk about this in the future, and share my insights as well. So I think we'll be hearing more about this
that would
in
be
the
exciting
future.
I would be looking forward to it, actually. And it's like you earlier said, it's a place where we are going to learn a lot from one another also. So to just also kind of, how do you say, co-walk with you around my journey so far, perhaps also answering my own question that has been forwarded to you is, so I think something that we have in common, and I hope parents also recognize this intuition, is I always ask myself, when did I knew that I was going to be a researcher? Especially in the school system and institutional setup that we have come across, whereby your professional life kind of appears to you later on, unless you are very lucky, like our crews here, who would have found their own paths on their own terms. How do you navigate that? So I think asking questions have been very much common, just like yours, very much common. I remember when I was like even 6 or 7, my older brother being tired of my questions, and I was known in the house for asking too many questions. Also in school, I mean, something that was persistent for me was asking questions. And now that I know, and listening to you, it's like very much playful way of relating childhood to adulthood is really that playfulness of hide and seek, or like you would search for something that is not visible, and you get it, and you kind of surprise others, and you'll be surprised by it also, sometimes almost pseudo-created fashion, right? So I think those have been very fundamental in our formation as researchers, and to find our voice or kind of pathways earlier on that is traceable so when we say research women, it's also research in general is like asking questions and trying to attempt them to find answers, or even to continue to seek them through different means. And so that has been very much common in our formation as researchers. Other than that, I also had a strong leaning towards to reading and trying to be able to see social history linked to. So there has been a curiosity around society and state relationship, and then also trying to see the different ways in which society lives and how that should be knowledge, and that knowledge should also come from the everyday. Knowledge should also be able to be communicated back to the everyday, and it's part of the everyday. So that has been the everyday lives, social history, political theory has been a question around which my research has been revolving around, and in that I think mostly of women also in the process of linking social history, political theory, and everyday life has been in my research trajectory. I have found out that, I mean, within the social history, to bring women from novels as a site of writing women's history was my MA thesis. And then later on, I've done work on like how to write histories of nurses in the 20th century Ethiopia, and also to find everyday voices of peacemaking from women, everyday elderly recollections in aftermath of violence. So I'm in those lines I could see questions around political violence, but also how people, everyday people, experience those political violence and see the way out of it, and the different creativities or aspirations towards to peace that everyday people account for. Has been the areas around which my research curiosities have been evolving around. And I'm glad to be part of EWNET and try to see also how those curiosities are going to evolve to learn. Like we just mentioned, the curiosity around business and politics. So,
talking about curiosity, I'm sure your research work on the student movement, I'm a curious reader of the student movement and movement in Ethiopia, and maybe you can say something on that. I know we'll have more discussions around that, but
thank you so much for that question. And actually, one of the books we have here, Netsanet Mengistu, a very recently published memoir, was part of the Ethiopian student movement earlier on, and later EPRP, which we call it. She was part of the party that has been formed from the student movement, and later on she created her own local NGO, which attended to young girls' education and I think reproductive health as well. So I think going back to that research one, I am citing her also. One of the invitations I found to do that research was to find myself in the university campus among very few women. And I had to find historically how my own training as a social history person in African history and social history, to be able to find the archives that could tell me a story of the place that I work in, and the prehistory of my own occupation, who were the researchers, who were the students, and their role in that campus. And then the Ethiopian student movement have been one of the archives in which I've been studying reading for a while. So it attracted me, the fact that I'm a woman researcher at the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. I think among the member of 16, it's two of us, and that few number invited me to kind of have a curiosity, who were our predecessors and what are the archives to talk about them, and can I start from the very archival site that I work in, which is the Institute of Ethiopian Studies, has a huge archive in manuscripts of different era. And I started from looking and tracing the women who were part of the universities themselves, who were part of a movement, and I kind of followed an invitation of earlier scholars who attempted to do the work, like Professor Bahru and others, but also to kind of extend that work. What does it look like to extend the archive that they have signposted us to, and to kind of rediscover the number of women who are alive, do our oral history, but also to look into their questions and curiosities that have been evolving within the movement. So it's a way of placing myself within this campus, but also to trace my earlier predecessors from the archival and oral history projects. So this is how I landed, and it's a very long, winding response.
I'm sure we'll have more time to discuss about it.
Yes. Again, I'm very glad that we are here at this historic podcast, whereby two women researchers are discussing about possibility of a network that is trying to remedy certain institutional imbalances. To start off the conversation, I will try to briefly discuss the conceptual framework that is guiding our action or intervention. as EWNET, which is empirically backed by the research that we have recently commissioned, but also through experiences of our own maneuvers within a structure, but also like we always discussed, the Rift Valley Institute had seen this gap whereby women researchers and policy discussants have been very much limited numbers, but also their voice was not as much heard. Their professional and intellectual interventions have not been accounted for, considering their male counterparts, and hence that by itself kind of initiated a project like such as EWNET. And although we now focus on Ethiopian women's researchers and the necessity of their network based on a conceptual clarity that our institutional, social, political life has an unequal footings, the way we started off, but also maneuver around institutional life, such as doing research and designing policy, discussing a policy, teaching, publishing. All of this infrastructure does have a very unequal relationship when it comes to gender, region, class, or other relationalities. And those inequalities are in a way an invitation to intervene, to make them more comprehensive, to make them more legible to many classes, genders, regional identities, in the way in which it matters that voices from different corners has to be heard, analyzed, their experiences have to be researched, put into policy based on the framework that they see themselves in the world. So it's that sort of absence that EWNET wants to speak to through the measure of creating a network, emboldening women's researchers' presence in the absence of their numbers in the broader research and policy infrastructure. And so the kind of conceptualization that has come about through the experience of not having as many women researchers within the policy area, and or their presence also not being acknowledged with the voices that they already are creating. So therefore there was a necessity to really conceptually address that by looking into generally not only women but also other identities do have this dialectics of absence in what is present. They are absent in what is present, and also their presence is not as much heard. So it's this dialectics that we are working towards to remedying, which is the absence of the absence that we have in social, political, and institutional life has to be addressed through presence, but also presence needs to be engaged in much more substantive way beyond mere presence, to actually have a relationship between presence and voice creating or voice curating. In that sense then, if what was absent is to be present and what is present is heard, that by itself is a very important empirical but also conceptual way of making our everyday institutional and social political life a much more comprehensive one and livable one. So for it to be more how do you call it, symbiotic to different cultures, different genders, different institutional and even generational lives, one has to first acknowledge that there are absences within presences, and those absences can be remedied by creating a certain intervention into presence, but that those presence also need to be beyond a mere quotas or numbers, but also has to be linked with voice of aspiration, voice of curiosities, voice of asking questions, or even presenting their discontent. So when voice is also curated in relationship to the presence, that's when our lives could be more much more aspirationally viable to professional life such as research, but also to everyday life such as life itself, whereby it's curated among different generation, among different genders, among different classes and regional identities. So that inclusive aspiration to inclusive life or body politic is what we are trying to intervene in through EWNET. So this discussion about absence and presence is, I think, a reformulation of our own paths within EWNET. So could you also reflect on the launch date and how this dialectics of absence and presence were kind of manifested in the very program of the launch, and also from your own research and policy maneuvers and spaces?
Yeah, I think we had a very engaging launch event. We had a chance to interact with brilliant women from different sectors, but different thematic focus as well. I think one of the feedback that we got, you remember, is that it was quite inclusive, that, and we made a deliberate attempt to make sure that whoever is present in the room represents a certain type of voice, and I think we've succeeded in that. But I also think that many of the points that were raised, both through the presentation of the RVI EWNET commissioned research, but then also through the live testimonies, is many of the factors that we want to address, both within the framework of both absence and presence. And I think many women who are listening to this, and of course who are present in the room, could relate to issues that were raised, especially related to the academic environment of research, is the systemic barriers that exist for women to excel, to advance in their research work. And I found many of the examples that were raised quite interesting, and of course, to be honest, quite sad as well, that women face a lot of challenges. Women academics themselves a lot of challenges, and the systemic barrier is something that's shared with many within the room. You remember how women were commenting on that. And of course, you remember the discussion on the work-life balance, which we have tried to discuss. I mean, it's a progressive literature and understanding, and I mean, despite what others think, women don't agree on everything. I think that's one of the spaces where we saw, So there were women who said there's work-life balance. There are women who said, let's not try to balance it. And there are women who said it's seasonal. At one point I'm a great professor, or I'm a great employee, and then at some point I'm a good mom and I focus on my home. So everyone was talking about their experiences and how they deal with these issues. I also thought that the issue of women who left academic, which I want to say something on also, is quite interesting, that while talking about the broad spectrum of systemic barriers, that it's quite important to address the specific areas where women struggle as well, and listening the testimonies of women who were in academic, who were engaged, and it was their interest, their curiosity, but because of many barriers and factors that they had to leave. So I thought that was quite important, and also these are women that we need to acknowledge. We need to acknowledge their presence as well. Absence, exactly. So the fact that they were displaced and absent does not mean they're not relevant anymore. Exactly. That this is also a space for them to amplify their voice. Maybe one last point before I pass it on to you is the interesting discussion about informal rules. So there's a formal curriculum of academic, but then there's a hidden curriculum. There are informal rules, informal networks that are quite important, that women have difficulty tapping into, or that women are isolated from. And these are important networks that help you advance your career, advance your research work. And from the presentation that was made, you could see that women were struggling because they were not part of that. So I think the launch brought forward in many ways the lived experiences of those women. Women were open about their experiences, they were sharing, but also I think that was a great platform for collective action. So I think it was a great start for EWNET. Maybe if you could also say something.
No, I think it's very, very, I mean, it's very beautiful that you brought this idea of like women who left the academic spaces actually could be the actors that enable us to theorize this notion of absence and presence, the embodiment of absence and presence. Like earlier we discussed about the conceptualization, whereby to acknowledge those absences and also to amplify voices. So I think the invitation for EWNET is actually to commission a research on those who left academic spaces, why they left, why they made the choices they made. And just to give an account of who this could be, these are obviously a high achieving academic so back in the days, to be part of an academic institution, one would have to get the highest grades, and these are usually 3.6 and beyond, and it was very much merit based and competitive, and they've passed through that. They made it through the academic institutions, and they actually, most of them, the ones I remember, have actually worked for 2 or even beyond those years within those institutions, but they decided to leave. So those accounts are, we don't have the entire account of why. We do have informal conversations, and sometimes we also acknowledge it through our own temptations, but we would need a research voice around those group of people who've left. So this is exactly a location where we can theorize about absence and presence, whereby we need to hear the choice to walk away from those institutions and why, and what do they miss from walking away, what do they gain from walking away, and why they made the decision they made. And I would like you to elaborate on EWNET's intervention along this line.
Thank you for that, Dr. Netsanet. I think that's a very elaborative way of expressing actually, the thought leadership behind EWNET, and that there was an intellectual labor to conceptualize what the network is all about. And I think I can say that many of the challenges and many of the conceptualization challenges that you spoke about also exist in the policy space. Women in the policy space, how they're recognized and how also they're not recognized. And I think this framing will be quite important in terms of bringing various members of EWNET together, both from the academic and the policy space. So talking about EWNET, it's of course a space for critical discourse, looking at the factors that you spoke about, looking at the important role of women in their work. The fact that they are present to do the work, but they are absent from the actual recognition itself. So within the network, there will be a lot of effort to recognize that. And one of our core principles is inclusivity, and behind that is we have used the principle of inclusivity to shape how we recruit members and how we categorize members. And this is one of the principles where we will hold ourselves accountable and of course hold our network members accountable. So the first type of our first way of pushing for inclusivity is we have different types of memberships. So first type of membership is our core membership. So these are women focused within the social sciences and humanities, women who intellectually labor and who are producing work. We want to recognize their presence through membership as core members. So as core members, they will have an opportunity to access the various work that we do, which of course will be elaborated later. Our second type of membership is what we call global solidarity. So we of course recognize the membership of women within Ethiopia, but we also want to work closely with other women outside of Ethiopia, but who do research on Ethiopia. So where these are, women researchers who are not in country. They may not necessarily be Ethiopian, but who follow Ethiopian social sciences and humanities study closely. So this is the second type of membership. The third type of membership is the honorary membership. So this is for women who are quite advanced in their career, who have accumulated years of experience and knowledge within the social science and humanities. First is, of course, we want to tap into their work and their experience, but also we want to create a platform where they will connect their work and their experiences through membership and through mentorship to other women, mostly focused in the core membership. This is designed in a way where it is inclusive, of course, across region, across ethnicity, and across class. So our attempt is to live up to this principle, to make sure that it's diverse enough and it's inclusive enough. I will maybe give you a chance to talk about the amplifying voices side of EWNET.
Thank you so much. Again, I think it's very clear from the side of inclusivity, as you've so the two pillars or values that drives the dialectics of absence and presence, how we want to make it a more comprehensive and substantively meaningful, substantively diverse collective, is through this notion of inclusivity, to think through it and to practice thoughtfully on how we recruit members, but who are these members. So the absence that we have acknowledged in the research and policy environment will be addressed through the creation of, like you said, an inclusive network that kind of organizes women around their work, which is research and policy. And the other side of that value that wants to address the absence-presence dialectics, like we said earlier, is the dialectics do acknowledge absence and remedy it through inclusivity, and then also acknowledge presence to be beyond mere presence, but to amplify voice. And by voice here has to be understood in a manner in which it's commensurable to the work that researchers do. So what do researchers do? Researchers go out and do research to either do for academic intellectual purposes or for a policy or practice. And this research expertise have writing, methodologies, publishing, and dissemination of their work. And hence the voice that we want to amplify has to be amplified along this vocational everyday toil, which has to do with going to the library, working with previous literature reviews, but also implying different methodologies in humanities and social sciences. Up-to-date cutting-edge scholarship has to be produced for the academic and policy research, and women have to be supported to remedy their absence, but also their presence to increase the quality of their presence. And that methodology workshops on writing, workshop on publishing, and we do have grant giving or very small grants to enhance their visibility in publication, in policy reviews. So the second value is amplifying voices. And like I said earlier on, those voices are women researchers' voices, and they are to be amplified through collective coming together communities of practice, like you said. So that creating a communities of practice of researchers to come together, acknowledge each other as researchers, like we do today, and to also discuss about their challenges and to remedy it through different interventions, if it's peer writing, peer reviewing, publishing together or researching together, but also, like we said earlier on, even though there are generational divides, we want to think of them as a very collaborative way, which is intergenerationally think through a certain vocation, which is research, womanhood and research. So then we designed a program whereby we do have podcasts like today, those podcasts would be created as a space for disseminating, but also as a space for mapping women in the research ecosystem. So it will be to map them historically by doing a biographical podcast session, but also to map them in the present as they do research and their work is coming out, to acknowledge it and to give them a space through podcast is one. The second is a seminar, which is a holistic seminar for all genders, and basically women are underrepresented in the policy and research area, but they work in an ecosystem with male colleagues. So then one way of amplifying voices is to actually have that space being filled by both members of our community, which is research community. And to do so, we will have a monthly seminar where both men and women will come together and under EWNET discuss their work and disseminate their work and engage in a scholarly and policy discussion. So that's the second one. The third one, we're thinking of a writing booth whereby women of our core members will come together, probably with mentors, to sit together for a few days to write up a certain draft or to kind of go through their draft and put it to publication. So the third is writing group. The fourth one is which is very important again, is to finance or aid a research activity for women who will get a research grant. There will be a call, a small seed grant will be given to either strengthen the research that they're doing, or to also give them a seed grant to start the research that they want to do. So basically the Amplifying Voices is curated around the research practice to increase their visibility, means in publication, in seminars, in disseminating their work through podcast, in policy reviews. So this would be the second value. The first value has been addressed by you, which is to thoughtfully create a certain group of community of practice around women and research and Ethiopia. And by Ethiopia, we also, like you said, we include both regional and, Addis-based scholars and policy makers within the government offices, within policy area. Women who are doing from NGOs, IGOs around policy and research in humanities and social sciences, but also those who are also working within Addis as academics and policy. So that area is, those are the two values, the inclusivity and amplifying voices are the two values which attach to the problematic that we have introduced through this absence and presence dialectics, acknowledging absence when you're not seeing someone in the room, to acknowledge that. So to design a program that brings them in, but also to acknowledge their sheer presence or mere presence is not an end on its own, but it could encourage our social political life much more richer by amplifying their voice to be heard, their aspirations to be tabled, their questions and discontent to be tabled, so that we all as society will have a more equal life.
I think that's quite elaborative. We've said so much about the thinking behind the network, how the driving principles, and of course a lot of thought put into on how inclusive and how many of the platforms and that we create are actually to amplify women's voices. So I think for me, what I see right now is this is more than a network. It's a space of collective action where women come together. And I think we've discussed this, and one of the things we were excited about, if you remember, was about potentially using research grant for collaborative work between academic and policy researchers. Bringing those skills and that intellectual rigor together for collective action. So I think it's quite exciting. We encourage women researchers to respond to our call for membership. We are excited to create the platform for these women, work with them and work for them to amplify their voices, and of course acknowledge their presence, and then somehow that translating into I think collective action is quite important. Maybe if you want to say something on that, please.
Yeah. So we're I think it's beautifully put, and you're just welcome to join us, and we are here to facilitate a collaborative network. Whoever is a woman, Ethiopian, and a researcher is a core member, particularly in social science and humanities, and you are very welcome to join us with the call that is about to come out very soon. So please respond to that call, write your letter of interest, and join EWNET to create a very strong network of women, Ethiopian women researchers. So like Dalaya was saying, to also which is beyond themselves, is to actually recreate a social engineering of a betterment to our collective life. We are excited, but we all are going to be working together to navigate and collaborate to create that strong network. And just to put a clarity, this is a network for everyone, but we will go through creating a membership step by step. For the first call, it will be announced very soon, and you could respond to it. And we don't seem to ambitiously claim a nationally very just organized network. It's to be made. It's a work in progress. So be part of that work in progress. Join the network and find yourself in the different network calls. For example, the honorary one, the solidarity membership. All of those are also open for people to join them. So that will be the more we are, the stronger we go. So to do so, where should you find our calls? Our calls will be announced through social media and different platforms. But most importantly, we do have a website that is functioning, and it will be the space where we'll put your advertisements, including our podcast will be part of that. So please go ahead and find EWNET Hub. So go ahead and check out that website, but also be mindful of the call. And we also would like to announce our forthcoming seminar and podcast series that will be, like I said earlier on, that will be focusing on disseminating works, focusing on biographies of women researchers and policy personalities. And our monthly seminar series will also be covered through this podcast. And so join us with listening, engaging, giving comments, and we are excited about the beginning of this journey.